All right, we got the transmission on the lift. We have a transmission jack. I think you know what that means. It's time to swap the 6L80 into the Trailblazer. I've kept you guys waiting long enough, so without further ado, let's get started. brief little time-lapse break. So the starter is now out. The OEM starter is right here. My Volvo electric power steering pump showed up today. Super excited about that. The factory OEM intake manifold is out. Now this is the one that just came out of the Trailblazer. This is one of the ones off of these spare motors here. And I could be wrong. I had to take the factory intake manifold off anyway because I am putting on the Atlas Industries fuel rail as well as an aftermarket intake manifold. I'm not sure if it's going to be that one or another one. We have to put the valve cover on. All of that requires the OEM intercooler, or the OEM intake manifold to be removed. And there are far better technicians out there than me, so I could be completely wrong about what I'm going to say, but I'm not sure that you can get the factory starter out without pulling the intake manifold. So that upper bolt right there, this one, this stud, you can get to that lower bolt from behind and underneath, but I was finding it increasingly difficult to get to that stud, and I was trying to do this without doing anything unnecessary for those that want to do a 6L80 swap and, you know, kind of do it themselves. Again, I'm not 100% sure that you can pull the starter without pulling the intake manifold. Again, I could be wrong, but from what it was looking like more pain than what it was worth to try and get it from underneath when, you know, I can remove the intake manifold relatively quickly. I know a lot of people think it's a pain in the butt, and it kind of is. That back bolt right here is a little bit of a pain. And when you're removing the trans and you have the cross member undone and the engine, like currently right now, you can probably see the engine is leaned back. Hey, Muffin. No way. That's awesome. All right, can you go help her for a little bit more? I'll be out in a second, okay? So cute. So anyway, as you can see, the engine is kind of leaned back. So with it leaned back like that, you actually can't get the 10 millimeter socket around the corner because you have to kind of go between this corner and the manifold to get to it. You have to use a couple wobble sockets and whatnot. So you actually have to put a jack back under there, jack the transmission up to kind of level the engine where it is from the factory, and then you can get it out. And then since then, I've already let the jack back down. So we already have the transfer case out, as you guys saw. So part of the reason you have to pull the starter to get the transmission out is because that bolt right there through the bottom goes through. I'm pretty sure it goes through and goes into the bell housing. So now that I'm saying this out loud, you really don't need to pull the starter at all. I think you just need to pull that lower bolt, and then you should be able to you can leave the starter in place and then unbolt the transmission and drop it. So I guess if you're doing this, all of this is kind of unnecessary. However, I needed to do this anyway, on top of which, since we're going with the Volvo power steering pump, OEM power steering pump is going away, and because that's going away, we are moving the OEM alternator location over to the passenger side, which is shown there, mocked up on that motor from Calvin and Andrew Nelson from PACC Racing. Super awesome part. Trying to not get too sidetracked here, keep the focus on the 6L80. So we're going to put it back up in the air. I've already removed the 3 torque converter bolts from the flex plate. So now all that we need to do is literally unbolt all the bell housing bolts, get the transmission jack underneath the Trailblazer, and drop the transmission. And then it's time to start going together with all the goodies. Before I can do that, I won't show you guys this on camera because you guys saw me mock this up, but I need to pull this all back apart, right? This is when we mocked it up to make sure everything was going to work. So I need that adapter plate. Obviously, I need the entire 6L80 transmission. I need the starter as well as the starter adapter from PACC Racing. So I need to disassemble all this once I get everything ripped out and then start putting it in piece by piece. So let's get back to it and get this 6L80 in here. All right, it's finally out. I know I've been talking about this swap for months, and well, as you can see, we are well on our way. So here is the 4L60. This is like the most impressive stock 4L60 I think I've ever seen or heard about, because this thing handled 500 wheel horsepower through a 4,500 pound vehicle for well over a year. And although it always slipped the first and second gear, it lasted, like it never faulted. It's crazy. So one thing I want to point out, this is the pilot on a 08 and 09 Trailblazer. For whatever reason, they changed how they did the torque converter, and I think someone put a part number for this, and this part number, the part number for this torque converter I think is the same as like a Chevy Blazer, like a early 2000s, late 90s, and this pilot kind of gives it away. So because of that pilot, you have this pilot in here. Now, like at first glance, you're like, oh my God, this isn't gonna work. But if you look closely, all it is a pilot bearing inserted into the normal pilot of the crank. The crank itself is still the same. They just inserted this bearing. So we'll have to yank this bearing out. And in addition to this, you can see the flex plate is different than a traditional Atlas flex plate. So it has this this two-step piece. It's like it's spaced out, which I want to see if that might work, because we're gonna have to use spacers anyway for the aftermarket torque converter, because obviously we're gonna run the adapter plate. So I kind of want to see if this will work, and I want to line up the torque converter to see if they line up with these holes, because if they do, this will be perfect. But I have heard that the distance from the center of rotation is different. Like the outer diameter essentially of the torque converter bolts is different on the 08, 09 than it is on the factory Atlas for the different years. And I have one here, so we can quickly see if that is true. So I'll line these up. It does appear to be plausible, as the holes are, they're not like fully perfect, but they're close. So we'll see. I may have to wall them out a little bit, or I could just use the other Atlas flex plate and just use the spacers that I have. But that brings me to my next topic. So part of why, oh, and then we're gonna have to reuse this, and I'll show you guys that in a little while. This may be a two-part video. I haven't decided yet. There's a lot going on here. Stock harness is still gonna be used, but yeah, there's a lot to unpack. This has been a long day. I know you guys have seen time lapses. There's a lot you didn't see because I had to pull out the intake manifold and stuff like that, but this has been like a solid 10 hours of working on this thing. This bad boy right here. So part of why I have not done this swap as quick as everybody's wanted is because A, it costs a lot of money and there's a lot of parts involved, and B, I want to make sure it's done right? Like Jesse from True Blue Motorsports has entrusted me to do this swap, and I want to make sure that everything we work through together is like considered. That way, when anyone wants to go do this swap themselves, you don't run into any issues. I'm trying to run into the issues now for you. Secondly is, you know, obviously, in addition to the amount of parts that there are and, you know, customization, there's also a lot of money and time associated with it. You know, I have a family. A lot of people, you know, can relate to that. You know, you want to spend time with your family, and addition, money, right? Like, you know, I am fortunate enough to be an engineer and make a good amount of money, but I do work a good amount, and we are a single income family, so the money that I do make, I have to be very wise about. That being said, this torque converter is something that I really wanted. I wanted a very good torque converter because I was not going to put a built transmission into this thing. A built 6L80, like a GM Performance 6L80, is like $5,000 or $6,000. Whereas I got that used 6L80 off of car-part.com from like a sub 100,000 mile truck, or maybe like right around 100,000 miles. And I think I paid like, I don't know, $700 or $800 for it. So, you know, for still less than the price of a GM Performance 6L80, I will have a billet converter, a stock 6L80, and then Jeremy Formato at Faster Proms will tune it, and he is a 6L80 godsend for tuning. But let me go ahead and show you this thing, because this is what we're going to be using. Now this is a Circle D Specialties billet 6L80 converter. You can see here the exact details. If you're interested in doing this and you know, you want to use the parts, that is a they have a part number specifically for the Atlas because the Pilot is a little bit longer. So I'm pretty excited about this. It doesn't tell you on here, but it's a 3600. I can't remember if it's 3400 or 3600. I'll put it in the video, but it's a 3400 or a 3600 stall billet converter. And the part that's custom about it, so Calvin, Knivelak 57, has been working with Circle D Specialties to make an Atlas specific converter. So it doesn't really matter the transmission, or yeah, it doesn't really matter the transmission that you're using. Once they have the data for the actual motor, it's a lot easier to spec this out. You know, obviously Circle D knows transmissions. What they don't know is how the motors react. So once they have motor data, which Calvin has been giving them, it's a lot easier for them to accurately make a converter that's going to respond the way that they want it to. So they do give you some torque converter bolts, which is really nice, some washers, and I will show you the inside, or the other side of this, the nice side, the billet side. Now you saw this thing was, I don't know if this is just a packing slip, so you didn't see. So I'll tell you, I'll be transparent what I paid. I did get it over Black Friday, so I got a slight discount, but I paid $1,276 for this. So all in all, really decent deal in terms of billet converters. You know, if you're into like glides and Turbo 400s, they can run like a lot of money. But this is the Pilot that I want to talk about. So some of them are a little bit shorter than this. And most of you know that if you're swapping a transmission onto an Atlas motor, you're going to have to run like the LS style adapter. So if you're in like an LS motor with a Turbo 400 and a Turbo 400 converter, you have to run that little adapter in the back of the Pilot on the LS motor that accepts this, so it centers it. Well, what Circle D did, and them working with Calvin, they've just made a longer Pilot, so you no longer have the need to run that adapter. I mean, those adapters are pretty cheap, so, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge deal, but it's kind of nice knowing that, like, okay, I don't have to run a separate piece. I could just throw the torque converter in there. But this thing is super nice. I'm really excited about it. You see the part number here. I need to see if this is going to line up with the converter or the flex plate that I have, the one that's not installed, or the one that's in the Trailblazer now. And then, you know, today's goal was to get everything out, which we did. You know, no more transmission, no more transfer case. And then I don't know if I'll do this tonight or tomorrow morning, but need to go ahead and disassemble everything there, and then do a couple things, put some seals, put some gaskets on the transfer case, and then start to get it all in. Kyle, you guys know Kyle from the videos. If you don't, he was my co-pilot on Sick Week. He owns Knights Automotive. He was generous enough to let me borrow one of his transmission jacks. I wanted to buy one, but talking about money, these things are like $800 for like a cheap one. So I don't have the money to spend on one of those, especially since I'm barely going to use it. So just wanted to borrow it. I'm going to go ahead and get everything together, get everything mocked up, prepped to install, and then we will pick this up tomorrow and hopefully get this thing installed. All right, day 2. The transmission adapter is installed, as well as the starter and the starter adapter, as you can see right there. Shout out to Emtech Motorsports and PACC Racing for these amazing parts. Now, this may have been an earlier adapter, transmission adapter. I'm not sure, maybe they're all like this, but this adapter actually came out to here, and this trans tunnel is kind of tight. So I had to cut off a good amount, like about an inch on either side. This side, it wasn't really hitting that as much as it was the downpipe, but keep in mind, the motor is probably about 2 inches lower than it normally is right now. I may actually have to come back in and cut this corner because once the motor is raised back up, this corner might interfere with that. So something to keep in mind. I may actually put the pole jack under it and raise it up just to kind of see if it's going to be an issue. But right now, I want to talk to you. I can't remember if I brought this up in the first half of the video or not, but just again, this is a 2009 Trailblazer. For those of you that have 08 and 09s because of the E67 like I have, the 08 guys, I don't think I have to worry about this because Calvin has an 08 and he said his did not have this. But this is a pilot bearing, kind of like a manual transmission would have. And the only reason it has that is because the torque converter they used in 2009 has this weird skinny pilot snout. Unlike the new converter, which is like a standard turbo 400, small block Chevy converter. So to get that converter to work, I have to take this bearing out. Now keep in mind, this outer section, what the bearing is pressed into is just the end of the crank. The crank is exactly the same as all of them. So once you pull this bearing out, if you have an 09, it'll work fine. But what I'm going to do is use the bread trick. If you guys have not seen this before, it does work. I've done it before on SM95 Mustang, and the first time I did it, I couldn't believe it, but it does work. The puller tool to get this pilot bearing out is probably 40–50 bucks. A loaf of bread is like $2. So what you do is you just keep shoving bread in here and keep compacting it. And eventually you get to a point where there's more bread. It needs somewhere to go and it can't go anywhere. So it starts pushing the bearing out. It's just simple hydraulics. So let's go ahead and get this bearing out and keep pressing forward. Once this bearing's out, I could put the other flex plate on. I am gonna go back to the old style flex plate. And let me show you the difference. But as a reminder, this is a 2009 flex plate, and I think 2008s also have this, but it has this step in it. The diameter of these torque converter bolts is actually not the right size. It's just a smidge off. But this flex plate is from an 02 to 07. This flex plate is the standard flex plate. These bolts do line up with that. So I'm actually going to wind up using this flex plate instead, and we'll go ahead and get that installed with the ARP hardware that I have for this. But let's go ahead and get this pilot bearing out and make sure it actually comes out with the bread. All right, well, pilot bearing has been removed and it took about 2.5, 3 slices of bread. Honestly, last time I did this with the Mustang, I feel like it took like half a loaf, but this only took like 3 slices, so pretty impressed. You know, Wonder Bread for the win, I guess. All right, what you're seeing is the first turbo Trailblazer 6L80 swap. Super excited. So this isn't bolted to the transfer case adapter yet, but it's sitting there to show you that factory cross member, factory transmission mount location. The only thing is originally we thought these were going to be the locations for where it was pinned. Now this is slotted, but unfortunately, unless this were cut straight, which you don't want to because of this bolt, you can't really move the transmission mount itself. It's supposed to be meant for the entire assembly to move. So I've already kind of marked where this needs to be drilled and tapped. And then we can bolt this up together, go together final assembly. Factory shifter cable, right? With the factory, with a piece from TBM, will allow this to shift on the 6L80. Super pumped. AN fitting adapter, you can get those from anywhere. This is where we're gonna run our lines. Straight back to our trans cooler, which I'm going to mount right here, I've decided. Somehow right here. Probably with the lines facing this way. I still do wanna run a full exhaust, so I gotta be careful with how I do this, but most likely I'm gonna run the lines down along the side of the tank, like maybe up here. Probably get some brackets and screw them into the up there, and then route them down along the side. Maybe I'll even go on top of the tank just to steer clear of the drive shaft, and then they'll go into the side here. A little bit cleaner now that those hoses are gone for the secondary air injection system. The new Tilton or Tifton starter, I can't ever remember what it's called. I don't even know if it says it there. It doesn't. But anyway, at any rate, I'm super excited. Let's see here. Torque converter spacing is supposed to be between 1/8 to 3/16. This is like 1/2 inch to 5/8. So I'll need at least a 1/4 inch spacer, maybe do like a 3/8 inch spacer, and I'll get some longer torque converter bolts, and then, ow, freaking bug just bit me. Then we'll be good on that. So we come in through the hole here to put the torque converter bolt in. Obviously to the bottom, I'll kind of hold the spacer with a magnet, and then we'll get that all torqued together, put these caps back on. I had an aftermarket pan for the transmission. It was like a Camaro pan, but honestly, the stock pan works great. But I am probably going to swap the pan anyway, because I got the whole pan, filter, gasket kit. So when I pull this back down to pull the transfer case adapter off and get that drilled and tapped, I'm just gonna go ahead, swap this out. Might as well. I have the new parts. That way I know the filter is good. The new fluid that's going in there is gonna go into a new filter. Hopefully there'll be no debris. Obviously the torque converter is new, so we want this thing to be as fresh as possible before Jeremy tunes it, and then hopefully this thing can be really reliable. We have the shorty dipstick here, so if we ever have to if we ever have to change or check the fluid, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I don't plan on checking it or changing it very often. So this is probably the only downfall. I mean, could I get like a flexible hose and mount it up top? Probably, but honestly, this is just so clean. I'd rather just fill it, let it stay full and be done with it. Now this, I had to cut. This is the factory starter location for like a LS motor. Running a 4-inch downpipe here, it was gonna interfere. We found that out the first time we tried to put it in. It was just a pain in the butt. So you're like, you know what? We're not gonna worry about it. So we went ahead and just lopped it off. Honestly, you know, if you guys are going the turbo route on the Trailblazer, I recommend going to like a 3.5-inch downpipe if you want to make power. I mean, 4-inch is obviously great for making big power. This thing is probably not going to make the power really needed or required for a 4-inch, but fitment wise, it kind of makes my life a little miserable. So I'm honestly thinking about redoing all this in 3.5-inch, and it'll definitely make my life easier going down here and making that turn over and around the rear end to get out the exhaust outlet of the bumper. But anyway, I'm super excited. As of now, this video is already super long, and if you can't tell by the title, this is going to be a 2-part video because I've spent 2 full days now working on this, and you know, even having all the parts, you know, just little mistakes on my part, and you know, obviously taking a bunch of stuff apart, first time doing it, it's just a lot of work. Plus I borrowed the transmission jack from my buddy Kyle. I got to have that back tomorrow. So the main goal was to get the transmission in. The transfer case, although it's a pain in the butt, you know, we can get that in and out without the trans jack, but it's the transmission that's really freaking heavy. So that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for supporting. I know it's been a long time since I said I'm doing the swap, but hey, guess what? Better late than never. Next up is getting this thing buttoned up. Part 2 will be dialing in the transfer case, getting the measurements, and hopefully maybe getting the drive shafts made and installed. I will need a front drive shaft and a rear drive shaft. I have a front drive shaft, like a stock one out of a Silverado or a Yukon or whatever the transfer case came out of. There's a chance it might be the right length. I highly doubt it. But anyway, I have the prop shaft, which is really required for the transfer case. And then I'm going to do an aluminum rear, and if I need the front one, I'm going to do an aluminum front to save and shave some weight. So thanks again. If you guys like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed and you like what you watched, please consider subscribing. If you are subscribed, thanks for following along, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.